Everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Stanley, and I have Thomas Hansen, president of global analytics company Amplitude, back for part two. If you did not listen to part one, we went in deep in terms of basically leadership, how it, a tech stack of AI and what's happening at a close to $300 million company, some really cool things that he's doing, even as the chief operating officer. While he still kind of has an SDR role, which I thought was interesting. That was something you're not going to want to miss at the end. So today we're going to go over to something a little bit different. And this is talking about career progression and building out, I don't want to say your internal portfolio, but your knowledge set so that you could elevate by looking at things a little bit more diversely. Thomas, welcome. Happy to have you back, man.
Thank you. Pleasure to be back. Appreciate it.
You reeled me in. You kept triggering little things. So I was asking questions. So part one went a little longer than anticipated. I will try and keep on track for part two. But I had a great time, and I love what you said at the end. So like I said, if you didn't listen to that, go back and check it out. You'll be shocked. You might fall off your chair. It was that shocking. So anyways, let's get back into it, man. So one of the things that I thought was amazing as you worked at some really large companies like Microsoft, you helped take UiPath public, right? And now you're working for another publicly traded company, and your charter is to bring them from 250 million to $1 billion. Okay. So obviously you know something about how to elevate yourself organizationally by doing different things. Most people struggle with this, right? This is really hard for folks to understand, especially if they're sales individual contributors or midline or frontline sales managers, or even other folks in marketing and go to market. So talk us through that, man. What do you think is the key to climbing the corporate ladder?
Well, I think, first of all, you got to know yourself. You got to figure out what is your one superpower. All of us, we have areas where we're not the strongest. I mean, I know myself, as I said in episode one, I'm not a full box of chocolate. I'm full of development areas, but you got to figure out what's the one thing you're really good at and then applying that. Now, earlier in your career, you may not be aware of that. So one of the things that I always advise folks as I talk to them and about their career is I encourage everyone to go and get diversity into your career. And diversity into your career can mean working on different continents and countries or states. It could mean working in different roles. It can mean working in different functions, working in different industries. I just think that early in your career, doing stuff that is not the linear, boring path, but doing something that is not so obvious. It teaches you to be scrappy, to have tenacity, to open up your eyes for different ways of doing things. And it teaches this one, your brain, to quickly catch on to new things. And that later on in your career will benefit you immensely. I don't know what the expression is, slow is the new fast. Perhaps slow down your career, your focus on career progression early in your career a little bit, and that will actually accelerate your career later on in a much faster way.
Okay. It does make sense. And so walk us through the different types of positions that you've had. Diversity wise, right? Because that's something I don't have a lot of insight into, and would love to just hear that. And then if you could identify what's the unique skill set or learning you had from some of those different roles.
Right on. Look, from a diversity perspective, I've lived and worked on 4 continents, 5 countries, both emerging markets and developed markets. I have worked in roles, individual contributor roles, all the way through frontline manager, middle manager, senior leadership, and executive leadership. I have worked across hardware and software, enterprise, SMB, and consumer. I have worked across so many different technologies within software. And I just think those very diverse experiences have just taught me to catch on, as I mentioned early on, to you got to quickly get to the TLDR. You got to quickly scale up. And the more you do that, later on, the more you're able to cover. I will also say one of the things that probably has created the most value for me throughout my career has been taking on the non-linear and the non-obvious choices.
Hmm.
I remember, gosh, this is way back when. This is almost 20 years ago, Ryan. I was working for Microsoft and I was doing a role based out of Istanbul, Turkey. It was a role sales director across Middle East Africa. And at some point in time, a colleague of mine asked me, "Hey, Thomas, would you one day be interested in being the GM or the mini CEO for Microsoft in Sub Saharan Africa?" And my initial reaction at the time was, "No, I don't really want to do that. Sounds tough, etc." Anyway, fast forward 6 months. 6 months later, I was in exactly that role. I took on that role and I did that role for 3 years. And it's my second best job of my career. It was just fantastic in terms of the people I worked with, the people I met, the cultures I got exposure to. But frankly, Ryan, at the time, it was a little bit of a turnaround assignment. It was, I wouldn't call it hardship, that makes more out of it, but it was challenging. It was just not the easy, obvious one to go and take to optimize for career, to optimize for earnings. So, yeah, to this day, Ryan, I think of this as the second best job of my career.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, and I think what you're saying is taking the non-linear role is so
Yeah,
critical. Like, so a couple stories come to mind. One, like, I didn't do that specifically throughout my career. I mean, I took some different roles, but not
yeah,
like you have cultural diversity, it sounds like, with what you were doing, and then functional diversity, right? Where you had
right.
different roles. So that's huge. And then like over the last 4 years, once I started my business, like that was like a fire hose of of
I
different
bet.
job functions and types. So I think
I bet.
that would have brought me way further faster with what I'm doing now if I had that. And then it's funny because like there's a CEO who was a former client of mine, and I became friends with him. He was of a publicly traded company, and he kind of told me the same thing. He's just like, "Hey, I took on different roles, and then basically that aligned me and got me ready for my first CEO job. We were PE backed, and then basically got acquired, and then basically." He did such a good job that he got promoted from the acquired CEO company to the CEO of the acquiree company, right? Or the one that acquired them.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, totally backs exactly what you're talking about. So what do you think are the nonlinear basically roles right now, specifically as it relates to AI that could help people, whether they're in go-to-market roles or any other roles? I mean, what's kind of your take on that?
Well, it's a hard question, Ryan. It depends on where you're at today. What I would say is go and find yourself a role in a company, and it may be the company you're working for today, where you really get exposure to the leading bleeding edge of AI and technology. And go and take something that might be a little bit uncomfortable. So, for example, let's say that you are a sales engineer today in a software company. Well, perhaps you go and take on a role in PM and lead from the front in product management or product marketing in trying to apply yourself in a different environment and hopefully in an environment where there's a lot of exposure to AI. Now, if you're in a role today and you're not changing or wanting to change role, well, think about what you can embrace in the role you're in terms of becoming the internal champion for a new use case and how you're leveraging internally for your own business AI, or in the case of externally for your customers, really become the one that is trying to set the new bar for what good looks like in the new world of AI. That might be some smart moves that are very practical and pragmatic and probably quite easy to get to.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, man, because like, and a great example that comes to mind. Did you hear what Asana did in this space at all, or no?
No, tell me about it. I'd love to learn.
So yeah, so basically, what Asana embraced this, and I'm having a brain fart on the CEO's name, but basically they embraced this, became an early adopter, worked with Anthropic and with OpenAI, and
Yeah.
effectively created like working sessions with their teams. They had a lot of GPTs created internally, but basically set it up so that it became integrated into their culture with everything they were doing. And one of the things that I saw interesting was that, like exactly what you're talking about, it was an SDR who got really into it, started creating a GPT for the SDR department, and then eventually got elevated and created like 10 to 12 different GPTs which are, for those that you don't know, GPTs are basically like customized workflows built in OpenAI for a repeated process that's kind of narrow and focused. So he was creating these own little bots internally and then elevated that up. And so that became a huge part of who they are, what they were doing. And then that accelerated across all different departments organizationally. Right. And that
That's a
was,
great story.
so that's like an example. I think Moderna did the same thing. I think they have close to 700 or 850 GPTs organizationally. And the CEO even said, he's like, literally, it would take 10 years to do the same amount of work that the team can do in 1 year now because it's so
Right
integrated.
on.
So,
Yep.
um, so yeah, I think you nailed it, man. Because there's a lot of opportunities that people don't know of or aren't aware of there. So, really,
Exactly.
really sharp insight there. What do you think about? Because I know you're very well integrated. You do investing. You're in the VC community as well, and obviously you have long track records. I imagine you have a massive network. Like, how does the investor community or the VC community look at operationalizing AI right now, specifically for organizations, and what's their expectations?
Well, I think this is just yet another industry that's going to be massively transformed by AI. If you go and read some of the online forums around it, you already can see how it's changing. Specifically, some of the entry level positions in the VC community. Previously, there were a need for heavy research, where now a lot of that can be not necessarily fully, but at least somewhat partially automated. So that certainly will drive change. There's no doubt about it. Look, industry after industry are going to get revolutionized by AI. One of my favorite use cases I've seen right now is a company called Harvey.ai. Are you familiar with them, Ryan?
They're on the legal side, aren't they?
Yeah, right on. I mean, initially that's the use case, but they're going to expand into many other services industries
Okay.
and then beyond. But what they're doing right now in the legal industry, they're basically automating case law research, which has been a massive workload for attorneys for law firms across the world, right? So there, they can do incredible automations, and in turn, I mean, in some ways, you can argue it's negative because it's impacting employment. You could argue in the legal fraternity. I just believe it's just another example of its technology that allows human beings to move up the stack and deploy themselves on far more value-adding functions and roles. So I just think it's going to be a good thing, not just for that industry, but for humankind as such. It's just another churn, and a very big one on the evolution on humankind by technology. It's fascinating.
Well, it's got to be great for you guys too, man, because like obviously you're working on the customer journey, you have AI integrated into
Right,
your products. So like, and
right.
I love the use case that you mentioned in episode one where you're like, hey, we could pinpoint like revenue growth opportunities that they could optimize the product for. Anything that you're super excited about with what you guys are doing to basically turbocharge productization or revenue off products, anything like that?
There's so many things we're working on right now. I think selfishly in Amplitude, the one thing I find tremendously exciting is right about 9 months ago, we went GA, we went public with our self-serve Find Try Buy offering, our product-led growth motion. I've done it a number of times before it was even a thing way back when. So I've gone through the learnings of doing it at Microsoft in the early days. I had a wonderful opportunity to spend time at Dropbox and learn from the great work that Drew and the gang at Dropbox have done to this end. Now we've been running it for the last 3 quarters at Amplitude. It has exceeded my highest expectations.
Really?
Look, reality is this: most folks out there, whatever role they're in, whether they're product managers, growth marketeers, in product, in engineering, they don't want to be sold to. They learn online, they learn from the community, they learn from their friends through research. And PLG, self-serve find try buy, just jumps so well into that equation to allow you to go and capture startups, SMBs, and small teams in larger companies as customers. And it's pretty incredible. We had an example this past quarter we just closed, where we had one prospect that went through our PLG engine, became an initial customer at a $10,000 value. We did some propensity modeling, as we do on all our prospects and customers, and identified this was one.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's phenomenal. So right, so you took, and that was due to the was the propensity is the propensity model in your product, so like you could see like, hey, like these are okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, that's awesome, man. Love that use case. There's so much opportunity there. I think I've seen that a lot. So with some of the clients I work to, where they're running so fast, they miss opportunities like that. So if you're making it available, that's huge. Okay, so we're once again we're just about up on time. So this time's flying whenever I'm talking. You're doing an amazing job, man. So I want to end it on this. Okay. Okay. What's the best possible? What is it? What is it? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dude, that's huge. I was thinking about that this morning. I shit you not. I am not making this up. I was literally thinking about like what do I find the most fun about work. When I was riding my bike, I for a workout this morning, I was cycling and I thought about that like what would be super exciting for folks with that. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you hijacked my questioning and refocused me back on a critical point. So I don't think I can do any better than that. So I think we need to end on that, man. So where can people find you? Where can they find more about Amplitude? And then we'll wrap things up, man. Fantastic. Well, thanks for being on. It was fun for round two. You did an amazing job, man. And I'm looking forward to seeing you take the company to 1 billion. I think that'd be exciting. And maybe we could have you come back as you hit different milestones and share what you've learned and, drop some other wisdom bombs on us. Thanks a lot, man. It was a lot of fun. We'll see you. And I will see you on the next episode.